Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well, and welcome back to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. So my last episode was a list of 18 horror movies still to come, still to be released this year. If you haven't seen that one yet, I will link it here and in the description box below so you can check it out. There are some really exciting horror movies still to come this year, and I included the release dates and where you can watch them. On that list was Orphan First Kill, and seeing as how it has now been released, I wanted to review it for you guys. This will be a spoiler review though, so just bear that in mind if you haven't seen the film yet. If I were to do a spoiler-free review, it would just be for you to go and watch it knowing near to nothing. It's a really fun time. Orphan First Kill is available to watch in some cinemas and on the streaming service Paramount Plus, and was released on the 19th of August. After escaping from a psychiatric facility in Estonia, Esther travels to America by impersonating the missing daughter of a wealthy family. Yet, an unexpected twist arises that pits her against a mother who will protect her family at any cost. So, usually with my movie reviews, I try to split them down into positives and negatives, but I'm not doing that with First Kill because I just really liked this one. And while it's not perfect, the weaker parts don't deter enough from the overall quality of the movie, in my opinion. I didn't want to know too much about this going into it, seeing as how the first film had such an amazing twist reveal, but my main interest was how they were going to handle their lead, Isabel Fuhrman, being nearly 13 years older now. I mean, she was apparently 23 when they filmed this, and considering that this is a prequel where Esther would be younger than she was in the original, I was interested in how they were going to get around it. And honestly, I think they did a pretty good job. I've seen plenty of examples of movies using technologies to de-age their actors, sometimes done well, sometimes not so much, but generally I think that it was done well here. Of course, if you look at pictures of Esther from the two different films or watch them close together, then yes, there is a clear difference. But while watching the prequel, I don't think you're as conscious of it. I think you just forget about it as you get lost in the film. So I have to say that the title of the film is a little misleading because the kills that we see in the main plot are not actually Esther's first kills. In fact, when we first meet her, she's already detained in a psychiatric hospital for previous crimes that she's committed. This is kind of a repeat of what we saw in the first film rather than an origin story, but I think that that's okay. I suppose it just gives them more to work with if they decided to do a third film in the future. And honestly, I liked the opening scene. There was a huge exposition dump, and while that can usually be unnecessary or just bad writing, I think that it works here because it has been 13 years since the original came out. It's good for those people who either haven't seen the original or haven't seen it for a while, and where in the original we weren't supposed to know the truth about Esther so that we could have the shock twist, we could enjoy that. In the prequel, we are supposed to go into the story knowing the truth, again for purposes of the twist working. I thought the opening scene was great. It was such a good and effective way of showcasing Esther's abilities to manipulate and to be resourceful. Plus, there's that one guy who gets exactly what he deserves. Ew. Another thing done well is that tonally, I think that First Kill does a great job of matching the original. These two films really feel like they are two parts of the same story. I would say that watching both of the films actually gives each of them more payoff. There are things in this film that link to and reference things that were in the original, which are interesting to see, origins of where they came from. Both are also winter horror movies, and honestly, watching First Kill really got me excited for autumn and winter. The setting is so cozy with the snow and the bare trees and the misty air, and the big house that the family lives in is just absolutely gorgeous. There were a couple of scenes set in the exterior of the house where they went a little bit overboard with the mist machine, but honestly I loved it. It was like a Hammer horror movie scene. What made me laugh though is that because this is a prequel to the original, it is of course set in the early noughties, but I had completely forgotten that fact while watching it. So when the characters are using these really basic, just, come with earphones and iPods, I was really confused, especially seeing as how this family is super rich. Isabel Fuhrman is incredible as Esther, just like she was in the original. I think, honestly, she's one of the most unique and interesting modern-day horror villains out there, and is just a joy to watch. The odd scene did feel a little bit off, as they were obviously trying to focus on making it clear to us that this is still supposed to be a child, but overall, just brilliant. Julia Stiles feels right at home in this movie, wife in a rich family, mother to an evil imposter child. It's a lot like her role in the Omen remake. Now, I love Julia Stiles. She was on top form in the 90s and early noughties, but while watching the first part of this movie, I was confused, really confused, as to why her acting was so off. Why was she so wooden? Now look, I've never had a child go missing only to be reunited with them 4 years later, but I just felt like you would probably be much more emotional and elated than the mum seemed to be during her reunion with her daughter. But then, of course, holy crap, with that amazing twist, her wooden acting, it now makes sense. And I usually see twists and reveals coming a mile off, but I didn't with this one, and I enjoyed it so much. I don't often get that shock, so I loved this. I think I was also just a little bit relieved to see that Julia Stiles still very much has it in the old acting department after that really confusing start. Her son Gunnar, though, is an absolute piece of trash, and I struggled watching him. He was just so annoying, entitled, and used to getting his own way. Obviously in this film because of his money, position, and who his family is, but I mean, it's not really a new idea, is it this? The mother-son relationship they have is also just so toxic, as she just perpetuates his entitlement by protecting him and covering for him. I mean, these two characters, Trisha and Gunnar, are vile. I think the real victim of the film is Alan, the poor husband. The other two just pretty much made their situation for themselves. There was also a little bit of twisted enjoyment for me that I got out of watching everything that these two vile people held dear. Everything that they had lied to protect just burning to the ground. I personally loved the plot of First Kill. I think that this portrayal of an old blood family who believe that their lineage is more important than, the law and morality, it does go a little over the top with it in certain parts, I will admit that, but all the time the film just remains a really, really fun watch. It's also interesting to have a villain who we know is incredibly dangerous end up being the one who is hunted and threatened, and a family of potential victims, like from the first movie, who actually end up being almost as cold and calculating as Esther. I think that this added something to the film, to the story. Yes, it probably would have been entertaining to watch another film where we follow Esther descending on some poor unsuspecting victims, but we have already seen that. This way, we get that part of the story. We see her worm her way into their lives and we wait to see what she does next. But the twist reveal takes a lot of the control away from Esther then, and now we have to see her readjust to her new circumstances. It's a challenge for her as a character, but as an audience, we're almost put back in the position of not knowing what will happen next. I mean, obviously we know that Esther will survive this situation, seeing as how she's in the original film, which chronologically comes after, but we don't know that how she'll get out of this situation. The kills in First Kill are also pretty decent. Some have a shock value, some are actually pretty bloody, and there's also quite a decent bit of variety in them as well. I mean, sometimes slasher movies can be a little bit uninspired with their kills. There's a lot of slashing and stabbing going on. Orphan First Kill actually ended up being far more twisted than I thought it would be. Yes, it veered into cheesy at times, and it has some bizarre choices, like the scene where Esther is driving a stolen vehicle, wearing sunglasses, smoking, and listening to Maniac from Flashdance. But overall, I actually really loved this film. Yes, I only gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, but I also gave it a heart because while it may not be the greatest movie technically, I think there is so much to enjoy here. And I actually think this is one of, not my favourite, but one of my favourite horror movies of this year so far. I would highly recommend this one. I'm assuming if you guys have got this far, then you've already seen this film. But in case you haven't, I would say definitely check it out. It could be worth a trip to the cinema, but I would say it also works perfectly well as a home viewing. Although I guess it does depend on your own personal setup, but I watched it at home and I don't feel as though I missed out on anything. So there you have it guys, my review of Orphan First Kill. Please let me know your reviews on this film down in the comments below and let's have a chat about it. I'd love to know if you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Also, let me know any ideas and suggestions for future episodes that you would like to see. July and August are usually quite busy months for me, but I'm hoping to get another episode of Truly Horror out as soon as I have the time to do the research for it. But I would love to know what episodes you guys enjoy seeing, which of mine do you enjoy seeing the most, so let me know down below. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by, I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will speak to you in the next episode. Bye guys.